What's going on, beautiful people? It's your brother, the philosopher librarian, the people's librarian. I guess it really depends where you know me from. It could be Brother Moa. It could be C. Fleming. All in all, it's your brother once again, man, and I'm just here to hash out some ideas that I got going on right now at this particular moment. All of which is to help me more or less chip at the overall structure of my upcoming book, Confronting and Defeating the Imposter Syndrome. And along that line, various other paths of thought come along with forming this book on this singular idea. And I know it's important not to fall too deep into these side quests, but sometimes I believe it is important to capture some of them as you can, lest you end up losing them forever. And I don't want to do that with some of these valuable insights that I've been able to develop in the overall forming of this book, I guess I could say. I'm gonna see if I can share a screen here. So this is how I use ChatGPT. And I'm actually supposed to be doing a hold on. This is how I use ChatGPT right here. And I'm actually supposed to be doing a library program about it soon. But these are some of the things that I use to help just kind of flesh through ideas. Instead of just using it as a Google, I ask it, various. It's not even necessarily only asking. Sometimes it's just, me getting a thought down and getting its algorithmic analysis of what I just said. And for me, it's done overall. It's done a pretty good job on analyzing some of my thoughts, but it has to have certain guardrails to I don't know, I guess to get the most out of it, because they do have what's called hallucinations, in which that it will, if it doesn't necessarily know, quote unquote, know a subject, it will see the gaps of the information that it has and try to fill it with something that it believes makes sense. I believe it did that on one of my recent Substacks on, I was connecting young what's that? Carl Jung and Nas, with locus self-control and living in your second childhood and all of that good stuff. And when it tried to quote some of Nas's lyrics, I was like, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a line that's actually in that particular in that particular song, or at least written in that way. But when it comes to actually parsing out the ideas and of the connections that I developed while using the diction systems for it to see what I'm talking about, I think it did a good job overall with that. But those are just some things to be aware of when you're dealing with ChatGPT, is the threat of hallucinations. So you got to know what you're talking about in general, even with the thing that it might hallucinate about, so that it could potentially exist. Just beware. And it says at the very bottom that ChatGPT can make mistakes, that it has. But I still think overall it's a pretty decent tool. I guess depending on how you use it. So the idea that I've been playing with for a long time is the librarian as an information scientist. So most of our master's degrees, like the second part of the degree, is the IS part. Now some of them are MLS degrees, Masters of Library Science, but some of them say Masters of Library and Information Science. And with one of my mentees that just started library school herself, I recommended that she is sure that she takes some of that IS portion of, that degree, the information science portion of the library science degree, especially within the public librarian context, because we use data to help move programs and build initiatives, build partnerships, or whatever the case is. So it's important for us to be information scientists and know how to use data and track the migration from raw data to wisdom. That's the big thing of it, and that's also the philosophic aspect of being an information scientist. And I look forward to delving a little bit more in that role of librarian, public librarian, as information scientist, because I believe that's something that's roughly, not really roughly, but overall just overlooked in the grand scheme of LIS education. So on the public librarian side of it, information science starts off for me with understanding the demographics of the area that I'm in. What's the racial makeup? What's the income makeup? What's the household makeup? What's the job makeup? What's the education level? Um, what's the leading industry in this area? Do most people work in town, out of town? How many cars on average does each family have? How many churches are in the area or other places of worship in the area? Matter of fact, what religion is the dominant religion in this area? What culture is the dominant culture in this area? It's various things that one has to look at as a librarian, i.e., I don't know if IE is right there, but as a librarian, as information scientist, to make the greatest impact that one can when interacting with one's community. This is a very important thing to do. Um, Having these things understood uh, will help you guide um, your programming and initiatives. I look up the schools, the ratings of the schools. What subjects does the school struggle with more than the other? Is it literacy or is it numeracy? Is it science? Because understanding that are potential partnerships or potential programming things that we can do to intervene at these particular areas. For my case, is childhood literacy. Childhood literacy is the most important thing to me. I believe it's the root foundation of everything else. So if we can have some type of effective intervention on childhood literacy early as possible, that will then pour over to the numeracy, into science, and so on and so forth, because the child has to have a grasp on literacy before they can be proficient in any other area. So that's why childhood literacy is the most important thing for me. It's more than just the ability to read and write. It's also the ability to be able to think critically. So, and that skill just grows, with the person. So when we see the data initially, it's just raw data out there. The raw data has no story attached to it. It has no form. It has no story attached to it. That's the step from raw data to information. When you take the raw data that you get from the demographics and all of that good stuff, you're going to try to form it into information, which makes raw data usable. The migration for data from data to information is building a story that you do not yet know the conclusion of. In scientific terms, we'll call that a hypothesis. So you develop a hypothesis with the raw data that you have. I hypothesize that if we develop an intervening measure for childhood literacy for rising third graders that will be able to raise the local schools literacy rate by X%. That's my hypothesis. And now I'm going to form now I'm going to filter the raw data through the lens of the hypothesis to see if that hypothesis ends up carrying any kind of weight. And if it does carry any kind of weight, then that raw data went from raw data to information to knowledge. Now this is something that we know. Now it's something that we know that if we intervene at the summer right before children go up to the third grade year, we do have some kind of positive impact, and this is the result of that information becoming knowledge. Now we'll take that knowledge that we learned in this particular setting, and then we'll take it to another setting. We'll take it to a similar one, another rural area, another urban area, or whatever the case is, and see if that knowledge is, when that knowledge is applied that we got from the information that we developed from the data in this particular context, we'll see if it has the same outcome here, 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 and here. And then once we find out that it does or has similar results here, 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 and here, then that knowledge becomes wisdom, or in the scientific world, fact. And that's how we do it. That's the migration from data to wisdom. But the guiding force of this migration is still within the mind of the information scientist. What is the philosophy of that information scientist? What is the mindset of that information scientist? When the information scientist looks at this data, what filters are they looking at the data through? Now, this is not a right or wrong answer kind of situation here. What this is just understanding that various perspectives are going to have various perspectives on the raw data, which forms the information, which forms the knowledge, which forms the wisdom. Everybody goes through the transmigration from data to wisdom. But this is the interesting thing about being a philosopher, because we love wisdom. So we look at the wisdom, no matter where the source of that wisdom came from, and then we reverse engineer that wisdom to the knowledge, to the information, to the data, and see if it holds up through that critical lens to us. So this is why it's important when it comes into the grand scheme of confronting and defeating the imposter syndrome. What if the librarian is looking at himself, looking at herself through the lens, their foundational lens of what they look at themselves as is lesser, not as qualified, not as worthy, not as equipped, not as prepared? That's going to be the foundational lens in which that librarian looks at the raw data of the raw demographic data of the area that they're supposed to serve. It's going to have an effect, and then that that forms the information, and then that forms the knowledge and wisdom. I had to be real careful on what I said right there, because I didn't want to say it taints it, because sometimes it just is what it is with that person's perspective or whatever. I didn't want to say taint. It sounded like that would disrespect the person's critical process. And I don't want to do that, even though it will take some confrontation, because trying to use my words carefully here. I acknowledge the space and a lot of my Black librarian colleagues are in, when they're dealing with the imposter syndrome. I acknowledge it. But for one to break free from that syndrome, to one to break free from that phenomenon, which is really called, is not even listed as an actual syndrome, but for conversational purposes, to be divorced from that syndrome using my methods of understanding, you have to confront it and defeat it by calling out the farce that it is. It doesn't deserve any respect. It doesn't deserve any soft talk to it. Talking about it itself, not the person that's suffering from it. The imposter syndrome itself must be spoken to and about as the lie that it is. This also coincides with racism and all these other social lies that have been created to oppress the minds of people. You don't need any permission to do so. That's just something that you just got to do. That's the trick. They make it seem like racism and imposter syndrome is just this big bad wolf, when it's not. It's just something that our minds made real, and it has lasting effects. Now, I'm not saying that the environments that are created to reinforce the ideals of imposter syndrome or racism are not real. I'm not saying that. That's two different things. That has to be understood. Those are two different things. But you know what? I think that's all I got tonight. I appreciate y'all chilling with me. Thank you. And it's your brother, the philosopher librarian, the people's librarian. We'll see you next time. Peace.